Hello and welcome to another Facebook Live. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Sunshine, and today we're going to be talking about anxiety and COVID-19. And I'm coming to you live from sunny Southern California. And if you happen to be listening, if you could type your name and where you're from into the chat box, that would be great. I want to get a picture of that nice poinsettia that's right there. So beginning in January, these weekly noontime Thursday talks will be for members only. Those outside the membership will be able to access the summaries of the talks at a later time. But let's get started. So anxiety is a common health condition. As a primary care doctor for the past 25 years or so, it's about 30% of what we see. When you look at prevalence rates in the United States, about 18% of people experience anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder. And anxiety can be a normal response to stress. However, if too much stress is happening, it can lead to kind of a dysfunctional response. We have this built-in autonomic nervous system, which automatically controls bodily function, such as heart rate, digestion, and breathing. We don't have to think about those things, and they're really out of our control. When anxiety hits, that autonomic nervous system gets turned on, and things that are significant stressors could be financial troubles, job changes, relationship issues. And how we cope with those anxious moments can determine whether or not we end up developing an anxiety disorder. Recognizing the symptoms of anxiety is really important. And I will discuss some of the common symptoms, but first I'd like to present a couple cases and how people kind of gradually developed anxiety. One of the cases is more related to the COVID crisis, and the other one is not. Recent surveys with people have indicated a substantial negative impact of COVID on the population's mental health. There's a lot of uncertainty. People are more anxious, depressed. There's more insomnia, irritability. There's been an increase in alcohol consumption. This current climate of uncertainty, worries about the immediate and long-term consequences of the pandemic are to be expected. However, excessive worry that perpetuates a common symptom of anxiety can begin to interfere with things like concentration and daily tasks. Worrying about COVID-19 can affect our concentration, sleep, and energy levels, and that's what we're seeing. So my first case, and this is not the person's real name, I'm going to call her Jill, originally from North Carolina. She completed college in Georgia. She accepted an accounting firm job in Irvine. She was exercising regularly. She went to the gym and did spin. She was developing friendships within the corporation. And she enjoyed cooking. She enjoyed eating out. She really had healthy lifestyle habits, and she got regular sleep. When the pandemic hit, she was told she was going to get a 10% pay cut in her salary, and it was okay. A month later, she was told she was going to be working remotely. So she started doing that and kind of lost touch and got a little bit more isolated, working from home. She wasn't able to go out because the restaurants were being closed. Her gym was closed, so she wasn't working out regularly. She was becoming more isolated. She started watching the news after work and got really interested in kind of the sensationalism of the news. It really wasn't something she was involved with before. And she is a kind of a fiscal conservative, but more of a social liberal. So she'd flip back and forth between channels and got to where she was getting more caught up in the news. Again, wasn't working out. And then she noticed that her ability to concentrate was kind of being impaired. And before I finish my story about Jill, and I'll come back to this, I'm going to talk about my next case, who is Jack. And Jack is a medical doctor who attended medical school and completed a family medicine residency. He loved medicine. He loved medical school. He loved seeing patients. And back then, when he was practicing, we were still using paper charts. And so he couldn't go into an exam room, say hello to a patient, look them in the eye, write a couple notes, examine his patients. And then the information technology boom kind of hit, 15, 20 years ago. Everyone started going to electronic medical records. And so he realized he had to chart more. He had to do more computer entry. He had more responsibilities. He had more check boxes to complete. And then he found he was spending more time typing in his progress notes, less time looking in his patient's eyes, less time examining his patients, kind of cutting corners just to get through the day. And after work, he would only spend time with his family. And when he realized he'd had enough time to sit down and have dinner with them, and then he'd have to go back and finish up charting for another 1 or 2 hours. His love of medicine and love for his patients was beginning to wane. He was feeling burnt out. We know the burnout rate in physicians, primarily, especially primary care doctors, is about 48%. His food choices at the cafeteria, mostly fried food and processed carbohydrates, bread, pasta, and sugary food. And Jack, unfortunately, like most physicians, don't really work out much because they're so busy with work. And he was noticing he was becoming irritable, restless, and agitated. So let's talk about, put Jack's story on hold, but what are some of the common symptoms of anxiety? We know that excessive worry, especially if you're worrying for most days for more than 6 months, that is by definition generalized anxiety. And people who are single, like Jill, under 65, and have lower socioeconomic status are more prone to developing excessive worry. Other symptoms are agitation, restlessness, muscle tension, and panic attacks. These are all very common symptoms. And the first step is really recognizing these symptoms. A lot of people don't know what it is. In my practice, in my experience, patients will come in and say, I feel anxious. I feel like I'm having anxiety. So a lot of times patients come to me already diagnosed, but not always. I would say probably half the time patients come in and they're having headaches or they haven't been able to sleep. And so we got to kind of tease through. Fortunately, with my practice, I do a direct primary care model, so I can spend more time with patients and we can tease through what's going on in their life. We can see, are they having financial issues? Are they having relationship issues? What else has changed? Are they exercising less? Is their diet poor? Is that something we need to look at? Are they having more responsibility at work? Or are they becoming more isolated? And then we can kind of guide treatment based on those symptoms. So when we go back to Jill, so what happened with Jill? She was struggling with concentrating at work. She was becoming more isolated. She was being overwhelmed and worrying about the news and the pandemic. She wasn't able to go back to North Carolina to see her family because of the pandemic. She didn't want to go on a flight. She didn't want to increase the risk of her parents. So that even made her more agitated, more irritable. She was starting to lose sleep. So classic symptoms. What did she do? She first discussed this with one of her coworkers who said, hey, you know what? I've got this great medication. It's called Adderall. You should try it. So she took it and she felt she can concentrate. It didn't really calm any of her other symptoms. In fact, it made her more agitated, more restless, gave her more insomnia, but she felt she could concentrate better. So she came to me and said, hey, Dr. Sunshine, what do you think about putting me on Adderall? I find I can concentrate more. So I sat her down and we discussed all of these changes that had gone on in her life. The fact that she was no longer exercising, she wasn't able to do her spin class. Her joy of cooking had kind of dissipated. She was relying more on these food delivery services. She found that she was eating more processed, refined foods, and she wasn't getting a chance to really connect with her friends. And so what we decided to do, rather than start her on a prescription of Adderall so she can stay more focused, we kind of looked at some of the treatment options, which I'll talk about now. But really, I think that one of the key things when we deal with anxiety is really staying rooted in the present. And this is the whole basis of the concept of mindfulness. And it's really important to be present, not being focused on the past, not worrying about the future. It's constantly, well, what if, but being grounded. That's one of the first steps. I wish I had our psychologist here today, but at some point when COVID dissipates, I'll be able to bring back people in studio and be able to have in-person interviews. Until then, I'm going to go solo. So again, not getting ahead of your thoughts is really important. Restoring yourself through meditation. One of the things that has been helpful for me, and one of the things I've been trying to integrate, is a morning routine that takes 10 minutes or 30 minutes, where I wake up just focusing on my breathing, maybe then get out of bed, have a cup of tea or coffee, go for a short walk, or I do morning exercise before I go to work. Sometimes for me, low level, not high intensity exercise. High intensity exercise could sometimes stimulate more cortisol, which is the stress hormone. But I try to do keep my heart rate down and go for an easy jog, or I spin on my bike, or I'll do some stretching. Then I'll do some journaling, or I'll chart. The one thing I try to avoid is getting on my smartphone, getting on my computer, answering emails the minute I get up. I think it's important that people try to put social media, put electronic devices on hold until you kind of get going in the mornings. That could be something people can practice. Taking breaks from the news. If I get anybody who's anxious, one of the first questions I have is, how much news do you watch? Because it really is, it's alarming. And what we learn from the news is just sensationalism. And so one of the things we worked with Jill is get her stop watching the news. And that alone had a big impact on her outlook. Having her start doing some meditation, getting her to start to cultivate other activities outside of the gym, where she would go and do her spin class. What else could she do? She did look into, spin classes that were being held outside. I think that's acceptable. I'm not a fan of going into a gym. I haven't been. I've put my gym membership on hold since, early March, and I haven't condoned going into a crowded facility, especially where a lot of people are breathing. That's my opinion. But getting back in exercise, the benefits of exercise in terms of calming that fight or flight is critical. I mean, there's probably nothing that does more for us than exercise, whether it's helping with cell metabolism, to improving sleep, reducing anxiety, depression. I mean, studies out of Harvard compared Prozac to exercise and found that people got equal outcomes. Again, I'm not such a fan of pushing pills, because I think a lot of times these lifestyle changes are all that people will need most of the time to correct their anxiousness or their anxiety disorder. Certainly Jill's situation was due to these changes that were unexpected, and how we deal with them. I got her to start thinking about cooking again. Maybe inviting a friend over one at a time, as long as there wasn't any risk of COVID. And that really seemed to help. Improving your diet, getting back on eating, whole, real food, which she was doing before, and she kind of got away from it. She kind of got lazy and started ordering from these food delivery services, which are very high in refined and processed food. And that can cause gut issues, which can lead to mental issues. So there's the gut-brain connection that we talk about, that we know about. And I think it's super important. Most of our neurotransmitters, which are the molecules that allow our nerves to talk, are made in the intestines. 70% of our immune function is in our intestines. So we want to make sure we're eating food that is real, that's meant to be digested by Homo sapiens. So Jill is feeling better. She's okay with not getting back to see her parents. She's talking to them more. She's being able to concentrate at work just by making some of these changes and recognizing that what she's dealing with and what she's developed over the past 9 months is generalized anxiety disorder. And that really helped her quite a bit. Other things we can do is grounding. A lot of studies done out of Japan talking about grounding, and that's just being in nature or going to a park and walking barefoot on the grass or in dirt. And there's something about the exchange of electrons in our body with the ground, with the earth. We are of the earth. Walking on the beach. I try to walk on the beach once a week or so, and when I do, I try to go barefoot and get in the ocean. I swim once or twice a week in the ocean. I think that's kind of restorative. Connecting with family and friends. Something happened, Sandy. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm back. All right. Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay. So connecting with family and friends, super important. I think Jill was getting back into her family and friends with work. Another one is box breathing, where you take a breath through your nose for a count of 4. You hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold for 4 seconds. Box breathing is one of the techniques that they teach in the military for when you're in a predicament. And then guided imagery is another one, and then that's also part of meditation. Headspace is an app on the phone. It's the round orange circle as their app logo, and that's helpful for guided imagery and meditation. They use cartoons, and I reflect oftentimes on that, like when I'm feeling anxious or depressed, is the blue sky. That no matter how cloudy it is or it's raining, there's always the blue sky above the clouds, and that keeps me, again, grounded or rooted. And then progressive muscle relaxation is another technique, and you can look that up online, but it's basically, clenching one muscle group at a time and then relaxing. So squeezing that muscle group for 5 seconds, relaxing for 10, starting with your feet and working up your legs and your torso and your arms. And that can be very helpful. And then lastly, yoga. There's, I think there was a great study recently looking at people who were suffering anxiety from COVID-19. Again, the uncertainty and the fears from the pandemic, and having half of the group doing yoga and half the group just getting information. They found those who were doing yoga, and it was mostly what is called Kundalini yoga. This is more meditative yoga. It was very effective in calming people's anxiety down significantly. So let's finish up and talk about what happened to Jack. So again, Jack is the medical doctor who was getting burned out in his job, which is becoming all too common among physicians. I think partly because the information technology has made it more time consuming to input information. There's easier access to doctors, so there's an increase in responsibility in terms of responding to patients' messages, emails, and there's less time, I think, to spend with patients nowadays. As doctors, with the information or IT, information technology era, we're becoming, what's the word, but like commoditized. It's like plug and play. You can have any doctor in any position as long as you have a degree, let's say in family medicine. You can go to any clinic and see those patients, and it's becoming depersonalized. I mean, our healthcare system is broken. So what did Jack do? So a few years ago, he came and saw me, and this is what he was dealing with. And we talked about his job, and really there's no kind of light at the end of the tunnel. If you're in healthcare right now, let's say you're in primary care or even a specialist, you're working pretty hard. You're earning your money, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Things aren't going to change. the commoditization of physicians is not going to go away. Healthcare is driven by big pharma, by health insurance companies, and by hospitals. That is the status quo, and that's not going to change. What Jack decided to do is start his own direct primary care practice. So he left the medical mill, as some people refer to it as, and decided, hey, my love of medicine is really connecting with my patients and giving them personalized care, being able to spend time with them, look them in the eyes and examine them if I need to. And 3 years ago, he embarked on a direct primary care practice where you have price transparency. He knows what he charges his patients, and they pay him a low monthly rate. And he handles all of their outpatient needs through text messaging and video conferencing and inpatient visits. He doesn't have the 401k benefits or the bigger salary, but he's more content. He now, when he's finished with his day, he doesn't have 2 or more hours of charting to do. He can go home and spend time with his family and his children. He can now play catch with his son in the backyard, whereas before he was, chagrined that he couldn't, spend time with his kids because he was so busy doing the IT component of his work. So the other thing we started to talk to Jack about is getting regular exercise. He was fairly sedentary, and we started to get him to just do low-level exercise. Now he's hiking 2 to 3 hours on weekends through some of the local mountains. We got him to look at his diet. Again, most doctors don't get much training in nutrition. We know that deep fried foods, highly refined processed carbohydrates are inflammatory, and they can destroy gut health, and they can lead to mental health issues. So we got him to start cutting out grains and dairy. And within a few weeks, he noticed that his mood was improving. He wasn't as fatigued in the afternoon. He wasn't getting the bloating in his belly after eating meals like he was before. He was having more regular bowel movements. So he really started to clue into the benefits of a healthy diet and to cut out inflammatory foods, the benefits of exercise. He found he was sleeping better, and the insomnia that he was developing was gone. So a couple cases here, very different. One, very affected by the pandemic. I know a lot of us are dealing with this. I think it's encouraging that we have people who are really reaching out to help others in need. I heard a story yesterday where the mayor of Stockton, I should look up his name, but he got $15 million from one of the .com companies. It might have been Google, but don't quote me on that. And then he's able to disperse that to his constituents. Because right now, the government is still locked down on giving another stimulus package to Americans. And I think 20 other mayors from different cities have followed suit, where they're looking for philanthropic donations to help those people who can't put food on their table, who are out of work. I mean, that stress and anxiety, I couldn't imagine. So better days are ahead. Again, several vaccines on the horizon. They're already being given in countries like the UK. And we're going to have a lot more information soon. I think we'll be rolling out vaccines as early as the end of this month or maybe January, and we'll probably have a significant portion of the elderly and the vulnerable people vaccinated by the end of spring, early summer. And so I think we still need to be cautious and, be safe, continue to mask up, wash your hands, social distance. I think the end is soon with regards to this pandemic, and we'll get onto some sort of normalcy. So again, if you enjoyed the talk, let me know. If you happen to be listening, maybe put your name in the chat box or the comment box. If you have any questions about generalized anxiety disorder, let me know. I'd be happy to answer those for you. Again, these issues are going to be compounded over the next probably 6 or 7 months And I think it's important to start to recognize symptoms of anxiety and then some of these techniques that you can implement to treat those symptoms. They work. One of the things, getting back to the story about Jack, he had seen one of his colleagues and they put him on Lexapro. And although it helped calm this anxiety, it didn't really help with his feeling of lack of purpose, his burnout, his poor food choices, his lack of exercise. And I really caution people for reaching out for a pill from their doctor rather than really looking at your own lifestyle. Where can you make improvements? And small lifestyle changes can have profound impact on your mental health. And I think that's where we really need to start with people. Unfortunately, as Americans, we are a pill-popping society. We consume more than 50% of manufactured medications, and we're only about 4.5% of the world population. People think there's a pill for an ill. And I think what we need to do is get away from pills and teach people skills. And that's kind of the kind of concept of and the basis of my practice. And I think that's what we need to do, is to be teaching medical students about educating patients rather than just learning the pharmacopoeia of medications and what medications to use and what are the potential side effects and interactions with other medications. As I said before, the average Medicare recipient is on 12 prescription medications. That's got to stop. Medications are not the answer. We need lifestyle changes. And most people have chinks in the armor when you look at their lifestyle. Most people are not doing just the basic, the bare minimum of exercise and sleep and stress reduction and proper nutrition. So again, I want to thank you for listening, and think about becoming a member of my membership model if you're in California. And next week, again, I'm not quite sure. I've been wanting to talk about hormone replacement therapy in men and women, which I think is very misunderstood. But I think I'm going to stay with the current trends in the news. And I thought talking more about COVID and COVID-related conditions like anxiety was more pertinent. But those are some topics coming up in the near future. If you have other topics you would like to learn about, especially if you're in membership, please let me know. You can text me through the Spruce app, which is the communication portal, and I'd be happy to research those topics and do a presentation like I did today. So again, I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next Thursday at noon for another Facebook Live coming from OC Sports and Wellness. Thank you so much.